Last night, our first speaker helped guide us to honoring those who have been committed to making the industry better. He's someone who needs no introduction, but as I thought about it, given the number of people we have joining us for the first time, I decided that he deserved a proper introduction. Bob Goldberg is with Schoenberg, Finkel, Newman, and Rosenberg out of Chicago, Illinois. His areas of concentration are in antitrust, trade regulation, distribution channels, and contract relations. He started his career in the antitrust division of the Illinois Attorney General's office, moved on to the Federal Trade Commission, and then went into private practice in the late 70s. His early work with the association was with the System Dealers Association before it merged with the ICRDA. He has been a longtime advisor, advocate, and trusted friend to many people in this room, and I'm very privileged to have the opportunity to work and learn from him each and every day. Please help me welcome RSPA's legal counsel, last night's MC, and always, always, always our top-rated speaker at RetailNOW, Mr. Bob Goldberg.
Wow, 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 wow. If you thought last night was fun, that was Christmas Eve for me. That was just sitting and looking around the tree. Yeah, I'm Jewish, but there's trees, and I've read about them. But it's like sitting around the trees looking at the presents, just waiting to open them the next morning. And I've been waiting all night to get up here and be able to share with you my thoughts and to equalize the relationships and set the stage for RSPA for the next year. We have just had an incredible RetailNOW, incredible speakers. I just sat and listened to Keith, got 2 lawyers first thing in the morning. If that's not enough to really scare you about your business in the future, that's it. But we have solutions for you. We have wonderful solutions. Right up there, my name, my email, my phone number. RSPA is so generous that you can call me with any question you have, any issue you have, any topic that you have. You get unlimited phone consultations. So if you give me a call, send me an email, I will get back to you just as quickly as possible. And I look forward to it. I actually enjoy doing that. I enjoy speaking with you because that is my doorway to the industry. That's how I get the knowledge as to what the current issues are and what is bothering you. So, we started out this morning, the first song you heard, On and On and On, was our good friend Phil Collins talking about both sides of the story and getting respect. You've heard one side of the story since you've arrived. I'm going to give you the other side of the story and call you to action. We must call each other to action. Well, first thing though, those of you who might have gotten here a little late or drank too much or missed the opening session, I am not Emmett Smith, okay? I just want to make that clear. My watch band is rubber. I don't have an earring. I have no ring, no diamonds, and I don't think I ever in my life scored a touchdown. That, you know, I grew up in a swimming pool, you know, and no one tackled you or hurt you. The only thing I did, I was a backstroker, and I kept hitting my head on the wall. And, you know, I guess you can get a concussion and go on. But so there's no mistake that I am not Emmett Smith. The other thing I wanted to speak to you about today, and just sort of set the stage for you a little understanding, is TLA. You know, we all got TLA, you don't know what that is? 3-letter acronyms. We speak in a language that a lot of people don't know, but we know it, and you lose a lot of your customers, you lose a lot of your audience. I found it in a lot of the presentations I sat in. I didn't know what the words were, I didn't know what the acronyms. I'm going to Wikipedia and Google and asking. Even the PCI Council has this glossary of payment and information security, 2 sides going on and on. But I encourage each other that when we speak, that we avoid some of these acronyms. We know what they are, but our audience doesn't. I always tell the story that when people come and pitch us at the law firm and they start speaking in the acronyms, that my partners look at me and go like, what are they talking about, okay? So I want to get back to the line. My mother never wanted me to use the word ain't. I don't use it, but when I was a kid, you know, yeah, I ain't doing that, Ma, you know, that kind of stuff. So let's get on with that. Let's move on. Okay. Now, 50 Shades of RetailNOW. Now, you might wonder where I came off with this and what was happening with RetailNOW, but I listened to our introduction. I listened to how we began this thing. We talked about disrupt, right? Disrupt the marketplace. Make your point, make your mark, disrupt it. And from there, we went on to deliver. Once you disrupt it, you got to deliver. You just can't say you're going to do it. You actually have to deliver. And then we talked about dominate, okay? And that's where I sort of thinking about 50 Shades of Retail Now. But, you know, I didn't read the book. You know, even with Kindle now, you can get away with carrying it around. But I did see the movie at home one night, okay? But you know, I'm well prepared for this presentation. All week I drank bottles of Smart Water, and they're all in my system now. I'm ready to go. But you know, in school, maybe D's were the things that I had the most affiliation with. So let's talk about debate. Did we debate some of the issues? We're going to do that this morning. And did we find effective thoughts in some of the presentations or some of the points that were made? We certainly are finding defects in the equipment we're asked to sell and support. And finally, we need to defend our position. Resellers are the weakest link in the payment stream these days. We don't have a voice, we're not being heard, and we are being the focus of the shift in liability. And we must speak up, we must change that, and let me tell you why, okay? Disrupt, deliver, debate. There we are. There's our card company squeezing every single dollar they can out of the system, okay? Now, these folks built a superhighway. They built the interchange system. They put it out there. When I graduated from college, every single oil company sent me a credit card. Just came in the mail. Just sign it and use it. That's all you had to do. And then when I graduated law school, you got other cards in the mail. And they got us hooked on these things. You know, at the beginning, I was a little afraid of them. You know, I didn't move right into using credit cards, but they got me hooked, and I use them. And they set this highway. And then there's on-ramps, and there's off-ramps, and then they put on the toll booths. They're everywhere. There's toll booths everywhere, and there's all kinds of regulatory signs that we're dealing with. It's very, very difficult, but we need to ask the right questions. We asked some of the right questions when the QIR panel was up here. Somebody got up and asked, what kind of reseller input did you have when you came up with the QIR requirements? And the answer was, what a lot of people do when I have them on the witness stand is, some other dude done did it. I don't know, okay? I don't know who it was. I got to pass on that question. The real answer was, there was none. There was very little. So we have to look and ask the right questions and make certain that we're getting the right answers as they squeeze those dollars out of us. They put out defective products. And I'll talk to you about the litigation that's coming up. Why we went to chip and signature and not chip and pin is just beyond me. It's just beyond me, and it's beyond the rest of the world. But there's economic and profit motives involved in why that decision was made. Talk about two-factor authentication, that word that I can't ever say when I'm going on a roll like this. But talk about, has anyone ever had their signature verified at a checkout, at a card thing? For 1 month, I signed every one of my credit card receipts. You are stuck, okay? And not once did somebody question me about that. Not once did one of my card companies call me up and say, did you sign this? Is this a legitimate check? There's one-factor authentication. That's all there is, not two, not multi, not anything. I checked into this hotel, I gave them my credit card, it has a chip in it, they swiped it. Tomorrow at the office, I can call up and say, I was never there, I never did it, it's not my charge, and because it wasn't a chip reader, they'll charge it back as part of friendly fraud. That's happening, we'll talk about that as well. There are defective products out there, we're putting them in there, and it increases the risk for us, and they're shifting that on a daily basis. We'll talk about the excessive interchange rates, some of the highest in the world, the cost of fraud, the market dominance of the various companies that are involved. We'll talk about PCI and EMV. Let's move on a little bit. The PCI compliance cost, up, 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 up. I see numbers in the billions on what it's costing for compliance with the PCI requirements. Requirements that change on a daily basis. Requirements that are very difficult. You could spend 2 weeks a month going through all of their documentation. I try to keep up with it. I try to read the updates. I try to understand what the changes are. It's virtually impossible to do it. And even themselves, when I have a question and go to the council and try to get clarification, which is always very difficult, finding the right person at the PCI Council to give me that information is so difficult. The EMV compliance costs rise and rise and rise. We're seeing that on a daily basis. I've dealt with some folks who are trying to decide, do I put in chip readers or not? I'm in the restaurant industry. I'm a low-end restaurant. I only do average ticket, maybe $40 to $60, or maybe $10 to $40. What's the risk? My chargebacks used to be X. The cost of going upgrade to EMV, it's not a law, it's not a requirement, it's a voluntary standard. Fat chance. But it's, do I do it or not? They made the decision not, and then they found their costs going up and the chargebacks going up significantly, because the United States has the highest fraud rate of anywhere in the world. And that's consistently changing the liability. Where does it go? Not to the banks, not to the processors, not to the bank card companies. It's going down, and it's being focused on the merchant. I made a mistake. I admit it in front of all of you. Last year I got up here and I hammered the QIR contract. It was 25 pages of legalese that basically you gave away every right you had and you were subject to every liability they could think of. And I thought that was terrible. You thought that was terrible. And for some reason, they agreed it was terrible, and they took a 25-page agreement and codified it down to about 2.5 pages, and we thought we had a victory. The contract was good. The contract still is a decent contract. What they got us on was they got us into their system. You heard from Visa and the council saying at the QIR session, you heard them say there was a gap in the liability, in the payment process. There was a gap in that process. So we had to get the resellers in there, and now they've got us in, and now we're the weakest link in there, and you'll see why very, very quickly. The punitive fines and breaches continue. We'll look at some of those. You heard when Keith talked about on the PF Chang's, they had almost $1.92 million in fines and penalties for their breach. That's not unheard of. I've been involved in some that have gone up to $15, $20 million. They have a formula now based on the number of cards, the number of incidents, everything that goes on, and those costs just keep going up and up and up. Now, why is that important to you? Because if you're a reseller, you put in that system. If you're going to be responsible, if they get sued, you're going to get sued, and we'll talk about that as well. Decertification, rush to profits. When you become publicly held, as the card brands have, they have to report to their shareholders, and they're making certain that their shareholders are getting a good return, and they're going to get it at your backs if we don't speak up. Okay. Let's just start with Home Depot. That first number blew me away. I've asked people, how much do you think Home Depot spent in 2015 on interchange fees? And people know that I'm going for a big number, right? So they'll come back to me. The highest anyone has said right off the cuff is $50 million. They spent in 2015 $750 million on interchange fees. Where did I get that number? In their 143-page complaint against Visa and MasterCard that they have filed. They have sued Visa and MasterCard, and why have they? Because that $750 million represents a cost that they can't contain. They can't reduce. Although there are options for reduction, they're precluded from doing it. So what did they say about the card companies? What did they say about the banks? They said this. They said, number one, The council was formed by the brands and the banks, okay? They say the rules are enforced by the brands and the banks, that the interchange fees and rates are all set by the banks and the brands. What is this? It's an antitrust violation. It's a group of competitors coming together and trying to maintain the prices, which Home Depot alleges they do. And I think there might be some truth to that. And I also think that might be part of the reason that now they're seeking to have those PCI standards adopted by the Federal Trade Commission, which we will see, which will make it law, which will get them out of the conspiratorial and illegal conduct, because it's a law. It's no longer what we mandate, require, and insist happens in terms of the system. It's a vulnerable system, Home Depot says. Home Depot wants to know why we didn't go pin and chip. Why not? Everyone else did, you know, and they allege that they didn't go that route for two reasons. Number one reason, it was more expensive. Number two reason, that it would be less expensive for the merchants if there was pin and chip, because there would be alternative sources for processing those transactions. So, chip and pin less profitable, no multi-user rules, which you understand the Visa and MasterCard and requirements say that you can't have alternative sources, and we'll see where litigations come up on that. From Walmart. Walmart wants to do for their debit cards, run it through a pin and chip system, okay? There's alternative systems that are less costly for Walmart, which would, like Home Depot, help reduce the cost of these extraordinary expenses that they face on an annual basis. So, when you go into Walmart and you put in your debit card, it gives you a choice of the Visa debit system or the US debit system. I'm with you folks. I think I have some good knowledge. If I saw the two, which am I gonna choose? I know the name Visa. US debit, I don't know, the last US debit was, you know, out of my commissary account in the Army. You know, they used to take money from me. You know, I don't want anything to do with the US, okay? Who knows, okay? So they want to use chip and debit. What happens? They're in litigation as well. Because what happened is Visa says it's a rule violation, and if you violate the rules, we may not allow you to participate in the system at all, or we may fine you. We may issue you fines. Walmart's challenging that. Walmart says, take me to the jury, please. Let me argue to the jury. We want a more secure system, and Visa's saying no. Why would they say no? Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That's the only reason I can think. Kroger, same thing. Kroger has already been fined $7 million for their alternative, less expensive network that they're using for debit cards. They've been fined. Visa says it's a rule violation. You can't do it. They're engaged in litigation as well. They want to use chip and pin for debit. They don't want chargebacks. They don't want fraudulent transactions. They're trying to improve the system, and they're being held back by rules, which Home Depot said 2 slides earlier, violate the antitrust laws that are governed by one factor, one sector of our industry. We can't let it continue to happen. We got friends. We got friends, okay? We got friends. This is wonderful. You know, Tom Reichert can, on his Twitter account, go send a tweet out to Dick Durbin, because he's our friend. Senator Durbin from Illinois, that great state that give you, we won't go into politics, okay? It is a great state no matter who we give you, okay? But Senator Durbin, I went to him a year ago and spoke to him about the problems resellers were having and why the system is geared and focusing on resellers. We have vulnerabilities, we'll talk about that, but why the system's unfair to resellers and also unfair to merchants in my mind as well. And he put his arm around me, he said, Bob, you don't want me to take on another battle with the banks. He got kicked and beat on pretty bad the last time. But you know what? one voice wasn't enough. The merchants now are in an uproar. EMV has changed the whole game because it's an economic uproar that they have. They're arguing about the interchange fees. They're arguing about the equipment upgrade. This is an interesting concept that Durbin's looking at. All these changes that are piecemeal instituted through the system throughout the year. You know what happens when you go talk to your merchant. They're just trying to take money. They think you're just trying to take money. I don't have to do all this stuff. It's more money, it's more expense, it's more cost. You're just trying to nickel and dime me to death. So one of the concepts is that there be date certain to institute any new changes, and they have to be reasonable. The October 2016 EMV thing was totally absurd, and we'll look at that as well. So they're arguing about the equipment upgrade. They're arguing about the chip readers. They're arguing about the certification backlog, because a lot of merchants got caught in that abyss where they had the equipment, they didn't have a certification, and therefore they were getting these chargebacks, and they can go to their congressman, they can go to their senator and say, hey, what could I do about this? All it is costing me money, and that resonates. It resonates very, very quickly. We have a group of unequal participants. That's very clear. These rules aren't really voluntary. We don't have the input. The brands are circumventing the Durbin Amendment and other regulations, Dodd-Frank, that were put in. So Durbin wrote a letter on March 17th to EMV Co., which we know is Europay, MasterCard, and Visa, and asked them a bunch of questions about this liability shift and how it was instituted and what it was costing the merchants, and why weren't these things thought of and why wasn't it done in a more orderly fashion. Durbin's well aware of how long it took in Canada to implement chip cards, how long it took place in Europe, and why this deadline was put in, why there wasn't any grace period, why they weren't ready in certifying the solutions. All of these issues came up, and why? Bob's answer, your answer is, they're making money. They're getting all these chargebacks that have now been switched to the merchant, and all these chargebacks have not resulted in a reduction in the interchange fees. So they're making more and more money, more and more money. And that's all it's about. It's not, God, don't get me going. I might get excited here today, and I'm really trying to avoid that. But I wanted to say to the QRI, I wanted to say to both of them, RSPA agrees in certification and education. Please, we want to have our own certification program, one that will give you the test results, tell you where you need to study, and you know what? We may not have to charge $395 because we're not for profit. Why can't we have a certification program? You could look at it and tell us if it's good, bad, and different, what we need to improve, but let us do it. Let us have an alternative. We want to have these things. I wanted to say to the QR people, we believe in security, but is this the way to go at it? How do we get a more secure? How can you tell us you want a more secure system when you're using chip and signature? I'm getting excited, so I want to calm down a little bit, okay? So he wrote this letter. He wrote this letter. All right. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission. Next year, I will be on this stage to give you the results. I promise you, okay? Congress is on our side, and they're helping us. You saw the slide Keith had, too, on the FTC. I like these folks. I used to work there. I think they do a lot of great things. I think that they're on the right track, but they need to get educated as well. The Federal Trade Commission is mandate is to protect consumer information and privacy. Keith told you about Section 5 that prohibits unfair methods of competition and false and deceptive practices. And the FTC, when I was there as well, we tried to make that language as broad as we could. We tried to go everywhere we could. Congress tried to slap our hands. They do it through the budget. They do it through rulemaking. They do whatever they can. But the FTC's on the consumer's side. They have rulemaking authority, and now they're looking at the standards. They're looking at the standards in the industry and trying to decide what are the appropriate standards for data security. One of the problems with government, and I'll admit it, government, if there's a shortcut, you might take it, okay? So if you have to promulgate rules and regulations on security, let's see what somebody else has, put it in in our word processor and fiddle around with it. And that appeared what the FTC was doing. I assure you that they are off of that right now, but I also caution you that they are looking at those, and that really is in the back of their mind of what the security standard should be. They're looking at the antitrust violations, the same ones that Home Depot raised in their 143-page complaint, okay? They're looking at a single certification entity. How can you, the PCI Council, EMV, you're all cousins. You're all related. You're all doing this. It's a bunch of, the same folks making the same rules. So we want to make certain that the card exception essential rules are not optional. We know that. And they're questioning why the rules are being enforced by the judge and the jury who makes the rules, judges the violations, and then implements the fines is all the same entity. And by the way, along the way, as we'll see, they've got a couple other weapons they're using. I'm not talking about the FTC, I'm talking about the council. So we've got another friend, not exactly on our side, but they're raising the right questions. The National Retail Federation issued a 19-page white paper, which I take a look at it. It's on their website. You can read it. And I will tell you, every time you read the word merchant, put in reseller. You want to copy something and go to Congress or go and argue? It's the same argument because the merchants are getting squeezed as well. They're asking the FTC, in terms of their review of the industry standards, to make certain that they're not using just what the card companies and that inbred group have put together for their standard. They're looking for a single sector standard, but they want input from third parties. That's where we're going to come in. That's where RSPA is going to be heard during the next year. That's where RSPA will make sure that we are not the least represented entity in the payment process where all of the liability is shifted to. Federation asked about the market power that the card brands have, how the standards are involuntary. They raise the profit motivation. They say there's no retail participation. There's not. Kelly was very, very nice to ask me to join her. We went to a PCI Council advisory meeting, and they have some retailers there. It was interesting. They have Starbucks, they have Amazon, they have Walmart. In my mind, I had a phone call with a law firm that specializes in PCI breaches, and we were having a discussion about a specific instance, and they said, well, we have absolutely no alternative. We have to accept cards. I said, well, I'll tell you something. I have a few clients that have taken a different approach. They don't accept credit cards anymore. I told you the story before. They put an ATM in their little reception area, and they tell their customers, go get money out of the ATM. We don't accept credit cards. And for every time that ATM machine is used, they get $2.50 for the use of that machine from the person who put the machine there for rental for putting it there, which this retail merchant restaurant is, thinks they died and went to heaven on that. But the point being, they said, well, how many locations? When you're 250, 300, whatever it is, you don't have those choices. So it's not involuntary. It actually is mandatory, profit motivated, no retailer participation, and the liability shift. Okay, what happened to my graphic? God, it's gone. There's a good graphic there, by the way. It's gone. It shows a criminal, okay? Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. Remember? We all heard that. Well, in all of this, we're forgetting it's the criminals, stupid. That's what we have as criminals. You heard these statistics from Verizon. They're the 20 2015 statistics, 534 incidents. That just means we know that a breach took place, but where there's actual disclosure of information, there are 524. You know where they all are: accommodation, food, retail, key logging, malware, we all very unfortunately familiar. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that's our vulnerability. When you have remote access to one of your customers, you have to spend day and night making sure that your connection is not vulnerable. Multi-factor authentication, whatever you're going to use, you have to look at it and repeatedly make certain that you are not vulnerable. That's where we're the weakest. That's where resellers are weak. That's where we need to concentrate. And the only thing, Keith mentioned that, you know, it's mitigation. You can mitigate your damages in terms, or make an argument that your liability isn't so great if you have a monitoring thing. Well, I had a breach, major franchise group, and we had one of the companies who monitors 24/7 their system. We had 90 days of clean reports. There's no malware, there's no breach, the antivirus is working, the firewall working, everything else. Meanwhile, there'd been malware on there entered the whole time. Now, did we collect on their insurance? Yes, but still, that isn't even always an insurance. It's a best practices, and I say that. So, continue to monitor your activity, multi-factor authentication, and move on. Now, is the reseller, are we the cure or we the disease? I think that's easy, okay? We're the cure. Now, remember we talked about those three-letter acronyms? Yeah, I got one too for QIR. Quickly indict resellers, okay? That's what they're doing. That was our indictment. So when you say QIR, yeah, quickly indict us and get us into trouble, okay? The integrators, we fill that gap, and there's a gap they need to cover. They've got it covered now, but we need to make sure that it's not covered in such a fashion that we're the most vulnerable part. Now, QIR people say, no big change. These new QIR rules, no big change. You heard her say it. I was listening. I was sitting in the first row to make sure I didn't miss anything. No big change. No reseller downside, right? Yeah, I'll love you in the morning. No reseller downside. Don't worry about it at all. Just another true statement, okay? You say what you gotta say depending what your audience is. But the fact is, what's gonna happen? Yeah, they're not going out there to look at every single retailer merchant in the country and decide whether or not they used a QIR installer after February 1st, 2017. They're not gonna do that. We know that, they know that, they can't afford that. But if there's a breach, what are they gonna do? Let's think about it. What they're gonna do is the first question: who was the integrator reseller who sold to you? Number 2 question, were they QIR certified? Number 3 question, what did the acquirer say when they boarded them on, if they boarded them on after February 1st? And once they get those answers, then it's gonna be a big deal. Then there's gonna be a downside risk, and then they're gonna be looking at us in terms of damages and penalties and fines. Plus, they're also going to say a couple other things to you. Back in the day, Bob used to say, when I got a call from one of you, and one of the banks or card companies would say, hey, Mr. Reseller, Mrs. Reseller, I want to do a forensic audit of your business to make sure what, if any, vulnerabilities there are in your system. And what we would find is, I would say, on what basis do you make that request? And I would get blah, 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 blah. There were no answers. There was no liability. There was no contractual relations. There was no reason for that, okay? QIR changes that, and we'll look at it even further, but QIR now makes you be responsible and can subject you to a forensic audit. And by the way, if you deny them that privilege to go through your entire business and server and all your log me-ins and all of your contacts and remote access, they'll take away your QIR certification. See, this group that is agnostic, they're just out there to protect the world from fraud and ensure privacy. This group will use that weapon to take away your QIR, and if you're an approved forensic auditor, if they don't like the way you're doing, they can take that certification away. And if your software may not performing the way, they can take that away. They got you coming and going. And we're going to change that. We're going to change it in Congress. We're going to change it with the FTC. We're going to do it in the next year, and I'm going to get back up here and tell you how well we did on that. Want to continue with the education, reseller field input. You've got the knowledge. You're out there on a daily basis. You know what's happening. Not enforce and punish, but to make sure that we have a secure system. And it was brought up, somebody from one of our resellers got up at the QIR presentation, and they said, hey, what we need to do is to put in incentives and penalties to help get people to the right stage. You know, lower transaction fees if you're compliant. Do this, do that to make it easier and better for us. So we are the cure. We're going to have a voice, and we're going to get there. Reseller risk for QIR. If you put in an installation, Bob's opinion, after February 1st, and you're not QIR certified, I believe that could be construed as a material fact in the transaction. You go in, you propose a solution to a merchant, and you say, this is what you need, these are the equipment, the software, the safeguards, everything else, and you neglect to suggest that you are not a QIR certified vendor, and there are rules that say a level 4 merchant or above now need to have a QIR certified vendor. I believe that's a material fact that you failed to disclose, and that could be grounds for fraud, deception, whatever else it's going to be. So I want to make sure we understand that. I think there come with it. Some people look at it and say, well, maybe I won't, maybe I should. But I think regardless, you should be disclosing whether you are or not, especially if the question comes up. Same as the sale of a non-compliant solution. The QIR status has those unique burdens that we're now placed under, including forensic audits, including 30 hours of continuing education, have all of these things that will help us, but maybe not directed in the right area. Merchants fined for breach. There is a breach. They're going to come back against us. There's no question. You know, that's the way it's been going. That's the way it'll continue to go. They'll come against the reseller. You failed to disclose a material breach. You may have liability for that. I don't know what's going to happen with the acquirers, what they're going to say. I don't know what kind of forms or documentation. They're supposed to have to verify that the QIR reseller integrator was used. I don't know how they're going to handle that. I think that common business sense tells me that, you know, we'll say what we got to say to get new customers, and there'll be liability associated with that as well. But the merchant sues, we're in trouble. Okay. EMV, let's talk about EMV. I put the Cayenne Genius up there because I was with Love, Honor, and Obey, my wife of 46 years, and it was her birthday, and it was July of this year, and I'd bought her a gift, and she sort of wiggled her nose at it. I thought it was a great gift. I thought it was wonderful. I'd learned before, you don't buy something for the house. It has to be something for her. And I think I had it down, but she wiggled her nose. I knew she didn't like it. So, you know, after I got off the golf course, I took her to lunch that day. There are priorities, you know, that's an honest statement. And we went into this store. It's called Scandal. It's in Hubbard Woods, and she wanted to go there. And Scandal, by the way, has no affiliation with Victoria's Secrets or Fredericks of Hollywood. It's just a woman's clothing store. But there was a Genius Cayenne on the thing, and I said to the lady, I said, why do you use this? And her answer was, it was the fastest processor we could find, which it intrigued me that she had done all of that research to find out what would work and what was there. And I thought, you know, that's the right answer to give me. EMV, another 3-letter acronym, okay? See it? Encourage merchant violence. It has done that. EMV has encouraged merchants to be violent and absolutely hostile. They are totally up at arms right now. Now, we all have our TLAs, and we'll continue to use them. Why it was implemented 10-1, no reason at all. That should have been extended. They should have had all their ducks in a row. It wasn't done. B&R Supermarket down in Florida, the best example. Durbin loves it. He pulls it out all the time. They had an NCR system that they had upgraded for chip card acceptance, but it had yet to be certified, and they started getting their chargebacks right after October 1st. And they went to Durbin. They said, they also went to their lawyers and sued, but they went to Durbin as well, and they said, what could we do? We're caught in the middle. And not only is it the chargebacks from the liability shift, but with each chargeback we get, there's a chargeback fee of $5 to $30 per incident. So if they charge back $100, it could be 130 or whatever, okay? So EMV has gotten the arguments as well. They argued the interchange fees were not reduced. We knew that, and they should be, and Durbin asked the same question, where are all these profits going? To which Bob asked the senator, why aren't they taking this windfall that they're getting, which we'll see in their public disclosure, and giving us free education for certification? They gave us a discount for $250, then they took it away. They're trying to get it back to $395, okay? And if you retest, it's another $395. Profit, profit, greed. Greed is what the word I used, I think, when I got excited, okay? Talk about the chip and signature, talk about that. The card not present fraud was what we were all told. When EMV came in, it would all go to the internet. Well, it hasn't gone to the internet. It's gone to friendly fraud. It's people like Bob Goldberg who call up the Marriott or call up American Express tomorrow and say, hey, I've never been to Texas. I've never been to the Gaylord Texan. What do you mean you saw a YouTube of me making a presentation? That, you know how those things get done, to compromise? That's photoshopping. That's not me. I promise you. That's not my charge. I'm not paying that. If we all do, no, never mind. So, there's got to be someone in the audience, please go talk to them and get them to chip readers. Okay. You heard this from Keith, and I was almost smiling because I knew my slide had the same thing. A lot of us buy cyber insurance, okay? Number one, it's sometimes difficult to find a good policy. I've looked at a lot of them, and Bob reads the exclusions. That's where I look at it. And he talked to you about the P.F. Chang. P.F. Chang's cybersecurity policy was from Chubb. Now, Chubb's known as an excellent coverage company. You know, this isn't, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. These people actually have a claims division, and they actually pay claims, okay? They're a good company, a well-respected company, everything else. Policy had a $5 million limit, which, by the way, if you look at the statistics, in a breach, $5 million no longer, in my mind, is adequate. I think we should be looking at $10 million. But they paid the $1.7 million forensic investigation litigation cost. 1.7. I would guess 1.2 went to the lawyers. Now, some people might think that's bad. Someone like myself might think that's wonderful. But that's what happened. But that MasterCard $2 million fees and assessments was denied. It was denied because it was a contractual liability. It was an obligation they had pursuant to contract that two business people signed, and they had that contract. So we have to look, number one, at our contracts in terms of the cyber insurance and in terms of our own. Now, this is a very interesting thing. I showed you the glossary that the PCI Council put out. Here's another one. If you go to their website, it's just a great resource for trash. But here's questions to ask your vendors, okay? Another multi-page documents, charts, everything, and it's so cute how they do this. If there's a no answer, then go to another. I'll show you what they tell you. If no, consider another vendor or solution. That's their solution in the far column. So here's the questions they want you to ask. They want you to ask, is vendor QIR certified and on the list, okay? Number one question in their thing. And by the way, you should have this so you anticipate the questions and can respond to them. Everyone should really look at this document and know what they're doing. Does the agreement require the vendor to maintain PCI SSC compliance? Now, I've stood up here and given you documents and templates that shifts that to the merchant. Our contracts say it's the merchant's obligation to comply, okay? And by the way, remember those SAQs, self-assessment questionnaires, okay, where you have to go through all these things that you do to make sure you're in compliance if you're a merchant? Remember those things? Those points and factors, they have an obligation too. If I'm a merchant and I read this, oh, hey, if I get in my contract that they're responsible, I'm out of jail free, don't have to do anything. Does the vendor require remote access? Legitimate question. Do multi-factor authentication. Now, it used to be two-factor, but now they've changed the rule to say multi because they don't want you to think two is sufficient. You have 3, 4, 5, 6 factors, even better. So they just do a multi-factor. That's where that change came about recently. The vendor should agree to cooperate in forensic investigations. That's what they've been after. That's where they've been going. That's what they've been trying to do, and they're getting there, and they've gotten there, okay? You know, it's when you buy her a drink, it's not because you want to quench her thirst, you know. Oh, somebody else has bought somebody a drink, okay. Vendor carry cyber insurance. Well, because some of these vendors, resellers, integrators, I've talked to people, when they want to do a forensic audit of 100 sites and it's $1,000 each, that could put some of us out of business. So now, ask them if they have insurance. So in case they threaten going out of business, we can go against their insurance company, get some money. Will the vendor assist in notification if there's a breach? And you heard from Keith, there's all of these different requirements. They vary throughout the states. It's very difficult and costly to comply with. You have to give credit monitoring services plus as well. Well, and if the answer to any of these questions, this is from their sheet, if no, consider another vendor. That's what they tell you, okay? Well, what we're going to do is change this. We're going to do our very best at RSPA to change it. I'm not looking to protect resellers. I'm not looking to give resellers, acquirers, an advantage. I'm not looking to do anything but to level the playing field, get our input in. We'll be responsible where we're responsible. If we think that remote access is our greatest vulnerability, RSPA will take everything we can to help you, educate you, provide you with the solutions to help make sure that that remote access is secure and the system is secure. We'll be responsible for what we need to be responsible for. We accept that. We agree in education, we agree in certification, we agree in security, and we'll do that. But we won't accept having all liability shifted to us because of arbitrary rules and regulations. I promise you that this time, next year, I will get up here and give you those results. I'm doing it from the heart, out of passion, and not for increased cost, Kelly. Don't worry about that at all. And I mean that, okay? Well, the whole world's not doom and gloom. There are some good things in the world, okay? You know. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth. I would like to introduce, you know, RSP is located in Charlotte, so my first grandchild is Charlotte, okay? That's it. Charlotte was born on June 11th, and I haven't stopped smiling since, okay? It's the only thing in the world that's not overrated, grandchildren. The only thing that's not overrated, okay? I wanted to spend my last 4 minutes before we toss the ball on an issue that's come up and has been a lot of questions. I've written an article, but I want to make sure everyone's ready for this when it comes up, for employee classifications and hours and overtime, okay? Here are the traps. Failure to maintain time records, and that's for all your employees. You can probably get away with your executive people, but in terms of your technicians, make sure. Rule number 1, outside salespeople, 80% or more of their time outside the office making calls are exempt from overtime. You don't need to worry about those people. Just put them in another bucket, forget about it, okay? Number 2, pagers, cell phone, mobile devices are your worst enemy when it comes to overtime. because you get those bills. Why they send me a bill this thick that has every call, every text, but it has the time and the duration of everything I make. If you're calling your techs at night to get reports on certain things, if you're asking them to report in or send in documentation, it's very easy to document that at this time. Travel time's always an issue, where they're dispatched, and I'll answer any of those questions you have if they come up for your business. Same with education, training. You must have a policy statement on overtime. It must state that it can only be in writing to be authorized, okay? And by the way, if you don't have time records for your employees, the Department of Labor has an app. You can go to www.dol.gov/DOL-apps, and they have a mobile app that goes on your phone that an employee can put in their hours every single day. And if you get to court or you get to a hearing before the Department of Labor, and you have no records, their records will suffice. So here's what I want you to think about. These rules go in effect December 1st of 2016. There's been some noise from Congress that they're going to pass something, and they may extend this, but we all know how successful they are in passing legislation. It says that white-collar exemptions, which used to be from the amount of $450 a week or $23,000. If you made less than $23,660, you were assumed eligible for overtime. You get overtime. Simple as that, okay? It was above 23 that if you were executive, administrative, professional, or managerial, that you could be exempt from overtime, okay? And there you have to look at your job descriptions and make sure you have the right buzzwords and the right language in there. Well, the Obama administration tried to raise the minimum wage nationally to about $15 an hour, okay? And they were unsuccessful in making that change. They couldn't get it implemented. They couldn't get it through Congress. So they took another attack, and that attack was to raise these thresholds for overtime so more people would be eligible for more compensation. So the $23,000 is now $47,476. So if you're under that amount, you're deemed eligible for overtime, just as a matter of fact. If you're making more than $134,000 on the top end, you're assumed to be exempt. So what are we going to do? We need to look at those people between 23 and 47 and decide what we're going to do. I believe if they're in 40,000 range already, that you probably want to gross up their compensation and get them over the threshold, make sure the job description's right so they're no longer eligible for overtime, okay? That's an easy solution. Now, people that are doing that, part and parcel with that, are increasing the amount of contribution that has to be made for health care and other things. So you can net out the same cost per employee, but you might want to monkey with the compensation a little bit. Look at those job responsibilities, increase salaries. You can convert someone to non-exempt, okay, and say, hey, you're a non-exempt employee, you used to be in that window, but now you're now going to be, used to be exempt, now you're going to be non-exempt. You can put them in that window. Some people have calculated what the individual made last year. Let's say they worked 50 hours a week, they got paid X number of dollars. They're calculating now that the hourly rate will be X and the overtime will be Y, and the same metric will come out to the same amount of compensation, okay? So you lower the hourly, you figure out and say, hey, listen, you're still gonna be working the same number of hours, you're still going to be paid the same amount, we're just calculating it a little different. That's something else you can do as well. In addition, you can hire additional employees. It's as simple as that. So, I've got a big zero up here. And it's time for some questions. They missed my cue on the music, Kathleen, but that's okay. Yeah. Any questions? Yes, Bruce. Oh, here's the Emmett Smith toss. Oh!
This working? All right. few of the sessions I sat in, there were questions relative to an unlevel playing field because of the remote deploying ISVs, especially the ISOs sending out tablet products and having those remotely deployed for self-installation by merchants, and those somehow falling out of the scope of QIR.
That's what they said. That's what the QIR, PCI, they said those are out of scope, you're not doing it, right?
So you have to be on site, or
If you just
nobody knows.
package it, box it, and send it out, self-installation, right? I think that's an iffy proposition.
Even with remote phone support and so forth.
Well, I think once you get the remote support and they have one question on the installation, you're involved, okay? Sort of like a kiss on the cheek. Not a lot of satisfaction, but you're involved. I like to share with you things we can all identify with, okay? That's Bob's world. God, I got out of those lights, okay? Anything? Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to be liable for this.
Are there any, legal disclaimers or contractual things we can get out of that we can put on our contracts that, absolutely say we cannot be sued, you cannot do this? What can we actually write and get away with enforcing?
Well, there's two questions there. The number one is RSPA has a whole list of templates that are available that are updated on a regular basis that have all the exclusionary language you need. Then you got, you've heard Bob talk about this before, but you have learned judges and stupid judges. Learned judges rule in your favor, stupid judges don't understand your position, okay? You never know what's going to happen, but by all means, put in all of the exculpatory language you can, okay? And they're available at the RSPA website. And even better than that, if you have a question about the document, call me up, and it doesn't cost you one dime beyond your dues, okay? Terry?
Yeah, I was curious about the conversation about PJ Chang and the breach there. I've looked into insurance for vendors supplying products, and when I've checked with a lot of insurance companies, the only insurance I can find is it covers if we are personally breached at our location. Have you seen insurance that covers breached products?
Yes.
You really?
Yes. Lloyd's has one syndicate that was doing it. I'm not certain if they continue to do it, but there are policies. What you need to do is find a good broker who has knowledge in the area. Mike Seymour has a good broker that he has down in Atlanta that he uses. Get the name from Mike. Yeah, Mike, you have somebody, and there are policies that can help you. Yes.
Is there any reason why you can't charge for cooperating in forensic investigations and vendor notifications and things like that?
Yeah, you'll lose the customer.
And you're going to lose them anyway.
First of all, you'll have a contractual obligation if you're QIR certified to cooperate now.
You have a contractual obligation to cooperate, but do you have an obligation to cooperate for free?
If you have a contract that says with that merchant that if we're involved in a QIR investigation and our time and expense will be billed accordingly, you can do that.
What if it doesn't say?
No.
If it doesn't specifically say you will charge for those investigations, you can't.
I would look at the contract and see if there's any way to do it, but I wouldn't. You can send a bill to anyone.
Yeah, it's just your time, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're just billing
time
for
and
normal
material.
time.
Your maintenance support may say we cover this. Forensic audit's not in there. You can say it's, T&M. Good luck. Yeah. No. We have a friend.
All right.
I have a friend.
All right. So I have a friend, and it's called an EMO policy. Does that cover me for the cyber insurance, or is that a different policy?
I'd have to read the language.
Okay.
I can't tell you right off.
Okay.
It may not. I've read a lot of these policies, hundreds of them now, and as I told you, I go right to the exclusion page because they're so apt at, you're in good hands. Plop.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can. As my understanding, that Cayenne Genius solution is out of scope. It's a standalone total, and you don't need a QIR merchant to install that. That's what I hear. Okay, and they have emails supporting some of that, and I think Vantiv has a solution that's similar to. I'm sure most of them will at some point.
Bob, good to see you. Great information, but only 4 or 5 minutes on the labor. Might I suggest a webinar or conference call, because there's all sorts of questions on installers, if they're standing around because the counter isn't there, if they're sleeping in a hotel, on-call pay, all of that stuff that we...
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'd be happy to. All right, we got a lot to do. I'm over time. You have other things. We have another speaker coming up. I'm available. Phone number, email, call me. I look forward to talking to you. Thank you all.